A lot of opening game lines to talk about for the upcoming Louisville football season. We will do that on this special episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Joining me here today, my good friend, co-host of the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast, also women's basketball beat writer for Cardinal Sports Zone, Sam Basden. Sam, what's going on, man?
What's going on, man? Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Speaking of BetOnline, there are some opening numbers for the Louisville football season that I want to talk about on today's episode. We will start out talking about the over-under on wins that has been projected for Louisville. That's 5.5. We'll then transition over into the opening line for the Syracuse game. Louisville is a 4-point favorite. And then I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about women's basketball. So we will talk about what are the biggest needs for the team next season so far, if there are any. Let's jump right on into it. Just recently, the title sponsor of the show, BetOnline, released their regular season win totals for Louisville. It was 5.5. Last year, for reference, it was 6.5. Sam, initial reaction to seeing that 5.5 number, kind of too high, too low, right where you expect it to be?
Right where I expected it to be. But if he does have 5 wins, I think most Cardinal fans, me included, would be asking for his head on the chopping block. In all honesty, despite his great efforts on the recruiting trail, I think if he does have 5 wins this year, especially with the amount of talent on offense that we have coming back, the amount of players on defense that they brought in, impact players that they brought in on defense. So, and then this is what, year 4 into the same defensive system. We haven't had that in a long time. So if it's 5 wins, I think if it's anything less than a bowl game, let's say 7 wins, a lot of Card Nation, like I said, me included, would be asking for his head on the chopping block.
I get it projection-wise, a team that finished 6-7 last season, but I do think that the fact that this team probably was a couple bad quarters away from truly being 9-3. That's why I look at that 5.5 number. I'm like, oh, like it just seemed a little low to me to start out, just because we'll kind of take a look at the schedule. It's kind of hard to truly pick out which how the team would get to 500, assuming they go 6-6. I mean, you would assume that they beat James Madison in November, although it's not necessarily a shoe-in. South Florida, I would expect to be a victory. I think that they're going to beat Syracuse. You look at Central Florida, Florida State, Boston College. I mean, I think they'll win 2 out of those 3. So, I mean, when you look at that alone, I mean that's 5 wins right there. And obviously, I mean, they do have to go out and they have to win these games, but it does get a little bit more challenging at the end of the season. I mean, I guess I'm a little stumped because I see why it's 5.5. But me personally, I think that we're probably looking at about 7, possibly 8 wins here, but they have to be early. Non-conference schedule is a little easier than it was last year as well, not having another SEC team, but instead replacing it with, I guess, James Madison.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, we have to go. You have to beat UCF, Florida State, Syracuse, and James Madison as well, because like you said, at the end of the season, that 4-game stretch with Clemson, NC State, and the kids up the road, it's rough. And
so when you look at it from a what are some of the games that you kind of have, because everybody has like different opinions. I know for me, the games that I kind of have circled as, okay, this could really be the true parameter of how good this team's going to do this season. I know for me, at Virginia is one that I'm looking at, and then the 2 games that we arguably possibly should have won last year, and that was NC State and Wake Forest. Is there another game that you kind of have that you're looking at that you're thinking, okay, this really could dictate whether or not Louisville goes 5-7, 7-5, here and there?
Florida State, Boston College, Virginia. I feel like we've had the talent. Like, if you can match talent most years with Florida State, you have a talented roster. And I feel
Right.
like we've been able to do that for the last few years, but it just didn't show in the win column. So I feel if we can finally put together a good game plan and execute that game plan with the talent that we have, um, depending on how we play against Florida State, um, it'll let me know, okay, this team is legit, this team is real. It's going to be different this year. And then I say with Virginia because for whatever reason we always seem to play Virginia close,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we have more talent for the most part than Virginia, but we just I don't know what it is about the name Virginia. And then
Every
Boston
sport.
College, every sport,
Every sport.
and Boston College, they they transitioned last year from a run to a more pass heavy offense last year, and it was
Don't
kind of
forget their quarterback was out too.
right.
Yurkovec's back.
So, but I still think, and I think they lost Zay Flowers, didn't they?
Yeah, he's back.
I thought they lost him. I thought he went to the transfer portal.
He
But
was like the vibe was that he was going to, and he's like, nah, I'm coming back. I'm not transferring. I'm staying. It's like, okay.
okay, well, hopefully we don't let one receiver beat us because that's his go-to. And so, like I said, I think Florida State, Virginia, and Boston College, we have the talent on paper to beat those teams. So it is all about, like you said earlier, getting those wins early in the season because it's going to be tough sledding the last half of the season.
Kind of transitioning off of that, I know that there's some tough games in this schedule, especially in that last half. I had someone ask me recently, are there any for surefire losses on the schedule? And I said, yeah, I think there's a couple. I think that the game against Kentucky is going to be a surefire loss. Hopefully we'll play them a little bit closer, but I do think that it's going to take some time, from going from getting absolutely demoralized to truly putting a product out there that you're playing them close. I don't think we match up well with Kentucky. I also think that the game against Clemson is going to be a loss. I think they're going to bounce back. The year to beat them was last year.
Right.
And unfortunately, Clemson is probably going to have the best defense in college football. If DJU is able to take any step forward, or if that highly touted freshman quarterback is going to come in and do well, I mean, Clemson's a loss in my opinion. Outside of that, Sam, I don't think that there's any other game. I don't care how good Wake Forest is supposed to be. I don't care how good NC State is supposed to be. 2 games last year, respectively. Louisville probably wins maybe 5 out of the 10 times. You have both of those games at home this year.
Right.
Is there anything outside of first of all, do you see Clemson and NC or Clemson and Kentucky being, true losses? And secondly, to piggyback off of that, are there any more?
Let me answer the second one first. No, there aren't any more true losses on the team on this schedule because um, I think we have the talent to go with NC State, and with it being at home, I think that benefits us even more. Wake Forest, the same. For whatever reason, we play Wake Forest close, and it's usually a pretty good game. So, and that with that being at home as well, I feel like that gives us a slight edge.
Right.
Outside of, like you said, Clemson and the folks up the road, those are the only legitimate losses on Louisville's schedule. And I don't care. I'm a Louisville fan. I see things through red glasses, but we're not on that caliber, and it pains me to say that.
We're a ways away.
Yeah, especially where it matters most, in the trenches. The was it Tariq Thomas and Lole, like those guys help, but it's just going to take more than just those 2 players in the trenches this year, at least.
I definitely agree, and I do agree. I think that for the most part, I mean, at the end of the season, it's really going to get challenging, and it all depends on how you start if you're Louisville. And you have a great opportunity not only to start strong, but also to begin 1-0 in ACC play, which I don't think the Cardinals have dropped a conference game to start the season in terms of it being the first game of the year. In fact, I'm trying to think of how many times Louisville – I know 2014 they played Miami, right out of the gate.
Right.
I'm trying to think of, have they played another ACC team outside of like just, I'm trying to think of if they played an ACC team to start the year out.
No, I don't think we have.
I don't think so either. I think we've had some very good teams on the schedule. I think Notre Dame's probably the closest, but regardless, that streak ends this upcoming season. The Cardinals will travel up to New York State to take on the Syracuse Orange, where they open up as a 4-point favorite. We're going to talk about first reaction to that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again, Cardinal fans, for making Locked On Louisville your first listen. For your next listen, however, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, joined with my good friend, co-host of the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast, women's basketball beat writer for Cardinal Sports Zone, Sam Basden, talking a little bit about the football side of things. We talked about one BetOnline opening number. Another one was released probably a couple days before that. That is the opening lines for the first weekend. Cardinals open up as a 4-point favorite against Syracuse. Sam, Louisville absolutely demolished Syracuse last year on Lamar Jackson Day, 41-3. What was your initial reaction to seeing the fact that they only opened up as a 4-point favorite?
That even though he's not here, there's still a Lamar Jackson effect, because we basically have the same set of players outside of a few here and there coming back.
Right.
And you would think another year in the system, offense and defense, the players would get better and things like that. Even though it's on the road, I don't think it makes up for only a 4-point victory spread.
And
so,
I'm looking at some of these lines. I mean, the lines aren't that far away. Like, I get it. You try to be conservative. Could the lines change after people make some bets? They will, but I can't see them changing that much. For you, let's say you got the opportunity to set the line here. What's a comfortable, how many points would you be willing to spot the Syracuse Orange if you were making the lines?
10.5. I feel because, like you say, they always give the home team 3. So I think Louisville is at least a 2-touchdown favorite. Should be a 2-touchdown favorite. But you also have those weird quirks that happen in between the game and things like that. But I still think, regardless, Louisville should be at least a 10.5 favorite going into this game. But to see it so low at 4, they must know something that we don't.
Makes me want to drive over to Indiana and just hammer the spread.
I would. If you're listening, go ahead and do that right now, because first thing in the morning, go ahead and do that.
Definitely do that. I want to read this off to you. It's from James Parks, who's a staff writer at Sports Illustrated. He ranked the ACC teams ahead of the season. Obviously, this is not gospel. This is not fact. This is just mere opinion, but I loved his rationale behind some of these. For reference, I think he had Louisville a little low. He had Louisville at 7, behind North Carolina and Pittsburgh. But he had Syracuse third worst. He had him at 12. Here's where his rationale was. Dino Babers comes into what could be a defining season for his tenure at Syracuse. The head coach only had 1 winning season out of 6 and comes in under pressure to correct a record that includes just 15 wins in 50 ACC appearances. He goes on to say in the last paragraph, Syracuse fielded the league's 4th worst total offense a year ago and mustered under 150 air yards per game, the ACC's worst mark. The best this Orange team has is according a 30% chance to finish bowl eligible according to prediction models. I get it. Garrett Schrader has 1 year wiser in Dino Babers' system. Still not necessarily a good quarterback. They did, however, add Florida transfer. I think it's a Carlos Del Rio Wilson is his name. So would definitely give Garrett Schrader a run for his money in terms of starting position. But Sam, I really, really have a tough time justifying the fact that this Syracuse team is, unless we see vast improvement. Look, it's week 1.
It is.
Louisville is returning a good amount of guys from last year's team, including Malik Cunningham. It's not like they're having to throw in a new quarterback. I don't know what they see, except for they're just being conservative.
I don't know what he's seeing either, because
I don't want to disrespect him. Like, I don't want to disrespect Syracuse, but I'm also like, if there's one win on this schedule in the ACC, it's the opening game against Syracuse.
Right. So what I'm hearing from him is he thinks that the middle of the pack, the back to the middle of the pack, is very, very little separation. I'm also hearing that he thinks that he trusts and thinks that because it's Dino Babers prove it year, so to speak, or he's coming into pressure, that he's gonna excel. You know how they say pressure makes diamonds, or burst pipe, things like that. So I feel like he's trying to say that because Dino Babers is going to be under pressure, he's going to excel. And that's fine. He can excel, but in his coaching strategy and his adjustment. But what about the execution? Does that transfer from coach to players?
Well, Sam, let me ask you this. Could you make the argument that Scott Satterfield is under more pressure than Dino Babers, considering this? I think if Syracuse wins like 6 games, he's fine. Now, because let's see, the bar set for expectations for Syracuse is probably like this, and Louisville's probably like this, because 6 wins, you ask the Louisville fan base, what does Scott Satterfield have to win in year 4? A lot of people will tell you 7. I think it's probably around the 6 area, which is probably what I'm okay with seeing what year 5 has to hold. But a lot of people have 7. I would venture out and say, if you ask Syracuse fans, where do you want to see Dino Babers? They're probably thinking, let's just get bowl eligible.
Bowl eligible, yeah.
So I think as much, and I agree with you, there is pressure on Dino Babers, because if not, I think the only reason he probably hasn't got fired is because his buyout clause is so much. Scott Satterfield's got a lot of pressure too, but game 1, a team that, and I don't think you can overlook the fact that Louisville has just had Syracuse's number since Dino Babers has taken over for the Orange program. So I think that having the continuity there, Malik Cunningham just looking very, very solid in that game. I'm interested to see year 1, could that work against the Cardinals, and the fact that Syracuse was such a good running team last year. Sean Tucker was one of the best running backs in the country, yards per game. Louisville completely took away that aspect of the game.
They did.
It makes you wonder, could they do that again? Like, if you play that game the very next week, are they having that same amount of success? And that's kind of the question that I have, and that might be one of the reasons why, you can base a lot of it off of this team winning 41-3, but I guess you just never know.
You never know.
So
never know.
That's kind of where we're at. But hey, last segment of the show, I would be foolish if we didn't talk women's basketball with the guy who I trust more about women's basketball analysis than anyone out there in the Louisville community. No disrespect to anybody out there. If you are watching this on YouTube, obviously you are not going to hear the automatically implemented advertisements that are on the audio version. If you're listening to it, stay tuned. You will join back here in just a second. But for the final segment of the show, flying by with Cardinal Sports Zone co-founder and women's basketball beat writer Sam Basden. Sam, women's basketball in the offseason, Jeff Walz last year made some very, very solid additions, to say the least. Emily Ingsler, the 4th overall pick in the draft. Chelsea Hall, a very, very solid grad option at point guard. This season, what does he go out and do? Well, he says, you know what? The best recipe for scouting other players is the players that you have played against. Morgan Jones, who has made it her mission to tear Louisville up every time she's played, and also Chrislyn Carr, who is definitely no slouch, did some great stuff at Syracuse in her career. I honestly think that, backcourt-wise, it's probably better than it was last year. That's saying a lot, though, when you lose Kiana Smith and Chelsea Hall. It does seem, you lose Alana Smith, you lose some other girls to transfers like Romani Parker, etc. From what I'm getting is that they may have another spot if they so choose to utilize it. Let's just say for this hypothetical that they do have an open spot. Is there a biggest need? Is there a glaring need that you're looking at that you're thinking, okay, Jeff Walz needs to address this, or are we kind of solidly rounded?
Guard.
Really? Okay.
Yes, because I was fully expecting when we got the news that Alana Smith was coming back, that she would step into a bigger, more prominent role this year because she has all of the tools. She can hit the outside jumper. She can get to the lane, just beat just about anyone she's going up against one-on-one, and she's great on defense.
Right.
So it just felt like if you could see towards the latter half of the season, she started to come along, and we started to see why she was like the best JUCO player. So,
right.
And then we got Carr, and that's like, yes, that's the backcourt mate that we needed. And then only to hear that we lost Alana Smith to transfer, it kind of stung. And I'm like, well, who are we going to get? Because we need another guard. Like, Peyton can handle the ball. So can Mikasa handle the ball. But they're not guards. They're not point guards. And I think Coach Walz needs another guard. It doesn't need to be a shooting guard. It doesn't need to be a point guard. She can be a point guard or a combo guard. But
Just depth, yes,
because it's just a glaring need because we get everything else covered. To be honest with you, especially, I mean, he knocked it out the park with Emily Inkster last year, and then this year when we got Jones, I was like, wow, because I wondered where the scoring was going to come from because we lost Kiana Smith, we lost Inkster. So I wondered where the scoring was going to come from, and instant offense right there with Morgan Jones. And with her energy and effort on the defensive end, her length, her athleticism, it's going to be a lot of track meets with this Louisville team, and which Cardinal Nation loves, and so does Jeff Walz. But, well, scratch that. He just loves to win. Sorry.
Yeah.
He doesn't care how he does it, slow, fast,
Right.
whatever. He just wants to win. But I think our glaring need is just a guard. I look forward to seeing year 2 with Peyton Verhulst, year 3 of Olivia Cochran and Haley Van Lith. Like those two right there, those three, I think is going to go ahead and push us over the top because we know what Morgan Jones is going to go give us, as well as Carr. But we just need another guard to pair with Van Lith and Carr.
I agree with that sentiment. I would definitely not be opposed to getting another guard. In my opinion, I think really there's a couple different aspects I might improve. I think first for the I can't even speak, for the most part, I think that this team is really shaping up pretty nicely. I mean, you can't underestimate the growth that Haley and Olivia are going to have in year 3. I think Haley's going to take a next step forward to being a true number 1 scorer. Morgan Jones gives you kind of like the Emily Inkster vibes in terms of that athleticism and toughness. Chrislyn Carr, dare I say, I feel like might be a little bit of an upgrade over Chelsea Hall.
I agree.
Just a tad bit, but replacing Kiana Smith is tough. 3-point shooting, a lot of it's going to rely on players like Narika Kono, Peyton Verhulst to really kind of fill that void in terms of perimeter shooting. My biggest concerns, there's kind of 2 of them. Number 1, it's rim protection. I would love to go out and get a solid rim protector. 6'4", 6'5", kind of like another Liz Dixon, because as good as Olivia Cochran is, and as tough as she is on the interior, we saw in the Final Four last year why things can get a little tough when you don't have that size. Now, admittedly, Aaliyah Boston is not your everyday post presence, but we also saw it with Naz Hillman from Michigan, who kind of got her away. So perimeter defense, interior defense, but I also wouldn't mind to add another athletic stretch big. That can step out and hit the deep ball, but just an overall solid defender and can put it on the floor and attack the basket, kind of like Emily did. Because right now, when I look at the starting lineup, I'm thinking, okay, you have Carr, Van Lith, Morgan Jones, probably Cochran at the 5. who's the 4? Are you going with an unproven freshman like Zion Walker? Are you going to play a 4-guard lineup with Morgan Jones kind of playing at the 4? I doubt it. So that's kind of where I am. There's a lot of question marks at the 4 with this team. Is Alexia Mobley? Is she going to be able to step into that role? At 6'2" or so and play kind of the 4, the hybrid 3. That's kind of where I'm at.
Maybe even Jaylen Brown, Nyla Harris, but he has so much depth at that forward wing position that I feel like through practice and through game repetition, he'll find his mix.
Right.
So I understand why you would want. I agree with you. I understand why you want the post presence because in recent years, that's been the difference between national championship contenders and pretenders. And so we do need another big, but I feel like the combination of Cochran and Dixon should be able to get it done for us this year, providing we don't run into Aaliyah Boston again until the championship game. But
sheesh, hopefully not at all. Hopefully not to play her at all.
That's even better. So, but that's why I just felt like we needed another guard, and I don't want to push or throw Walker into there just yet. But let's be. I mean, I'll be honest with you. She was really, really good. She should have been one of the top 10 players if it wasn't for some injuries during the last couple of years. So we'll see. I trust Coach Waltz. I know you do too, because he has done nothing else but prove time and time again why he's one of the best in college basketball. So, but I just felt like we needed another guard, just to put my mind at ease. But I could see why you would want a wing, and I could definitely see why you would prefer more of a interior presence especially on defense.
It sounds like our conversation's really just whatever he adds is icing to the cake.
Yes.
Basically kind of getting that sentiment. But, I mean, obviously this team is going to be primed for another deep postseason run. And I don't like to wish things early, but I'm still excited. Like, I'm excited for women's basketball next season because it's going to happen. We are going to get over that hump eventually. This program is going to win a national title. It's just a matter of when. So, but hey, Sam, definitely appreciate you for hopping on, especially at a late notice. Do me a favor before you get out of here. Plug us into your social media and give any lasting thoughts.
You can find me and anything that I got to post about Cardinal Sports Zone on Twitter at Baseboy124 or at Cardinal Sports Zone. And my final thoughts are: first off, I appreciate you for giving me this opportunity here. Yeah. Like you say, it doesn't matter. Anytime you need me to just pop in and fill in for you, no problem at all. Just say the word. But go ahead and continue to go ahead and pay attention to Cardinal Sports Zone and Locked On Louisville with Dalton.
Yeah, man. Thanks again, as always, for making us your first listen every day. Do yourself a favor. Make your second listen Locked On NBA Big Board with your host, Rafael Barlow. You get that on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you like to listen to your podcast. But, hey, that's going to wrap up this, I guess you could say, Saturday edition of the show. Weird, like special Saturday edition of the show. Right. Sam Saturday. But that's going to wrap it up. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you back here